Hi everyone and welcome. One of the foods I realized I missed from Latvia after moving to Spain was rye bread. Therefore, I decided to try and make it myself. It turned out easier than I thought. So in this video, I will share with you how I do it. It won't be an introduction in sourdough terminology and processes, just baking simple rye bread at home. Here is doughy, my sourdough starter. I use about 150 grams of starter for the bread loaf. As I don't have that much, the first step is to make the necessary amount. To do that, I will mix some of the existing starter, about 90 grams, with 30 grams of flour and 30 grams of water so that I have 150 grams in total. If I have less of the existing starter, I will add more flour and water. I am using wheat bread flour. Then the package of a kilo of rye flour will be sufficient for 2 bread loaves. Ideally, you would use rye flour for the starter as well. I usually do this the evening before the day I'm planning to bake the bread so that the starter grows during the night and is active by the morning. Cover the bowl and put it in a warm place. Let's put in a big bowl the brown sugar, salt, and half a liter of slightly warm, not hot water, and stir so that the sugar starts to dissolve. And add the starter we prepared yesterday. It is bubbly now, but not very foamy as more than 12 hours have passed since I prepared it. Let's start to dissolve it in the water. Cover with a towel and leave for about an hour. Sometimes, if I'm impatient, I don't wait that long. Other times, when I get busy with something else, I leave it for longer. I bake the rye bread in a glass loaf pan. It helps to keep the bread shape, and I can also see what is happening with the dough. I have also baked it in a cast iron pot. As the dough does not hold shape that well, the baked rye bread turns out flatter and looks somewhat like a gigantic chocolate crackle cookie. I grease the baking dish quite generously with butter, especially corners, and spread about a tablespoon of seed mix on the bottom of it. That way the bread will not stick to the dish and will be easy to remove. For me, butter has worked better, as it seems that the bread absorbs the oil and does not separate from the dish as well as with butter. Now let's make the dough and mix spices in the liquid. This time I will add a teaspoon of dried garlic and a teaspoon of thyme. I often also add a teaspoon of ground cumin. You can add the spices you like or keep it plain. The bread has a very nice flavor on its own. And let's add the flour in the bowl and mix everything well. I usually mix with a wooden spoon or with my hands. This dough is hard to mix. It's like very dense mud. If needed, I take a minute of break and try to mix for about 10 minutes in total. The dough does not really visually change. When I had wrist pain and could not mix much, I just mixed it to get the dough together. But usually the result was better when the dough was mixed for a bit longer. If you want, you can add some seeds to the dough, for example, sunflower, linseeds, pumpkin seeds, or others. Let's put the dough in the baking dish and push down so that there are no gaps and level it. Wetting your hands will help to prevent the dough from sticking and also help you to make the dough smooth. I will spread a little bit of seeds on top of the bread. Cover the dish with a towel and leave at room temperature for the dough to ferment. It will not double in size. I usually wait till it reaches almost the top of the dish and bake, so it needs to grow a few centimeters. The waiting time will vary a lot. In summer, when it was above 25 degrees inside, I baked after about 3 hours. Now, when it's 20 degrees inside, I will need to wait for about 6 hours. When getting ready to bake, let's set the oven to heat to 150 degrees Celsius or 340 degrees Fahrenheit and put a small dish with water in the oven to create steam. 6 hours later, the dough has reached the top of the dish and looks puffier. I usually don't let it grow more as it will increase a bit also while baking and can overflow the dish, making a mushroom head. Let's put it in the oven and bake for 1 hour. After 1 hour, let's remove the dish with water from the oven. Increase the oven temperature to 200 degrees Celsius or 430 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for another 30 minutes. I often extend the baking time at 150 degrees and reduce the baking time at 200 degrees. That way the bread I have is softer and not so dark. But try and see what works best for you. Now comes the part which requires the most patience, as the bread is not ready yet. Turn the oven off, prop the oven door open and leave the bread in the oven to cool for about an hour or two till it's warm but can be touched. Now let's remove the bread from the baking dish, wrap in a clean towel and leave it till next day before cutting and eating. The bread is still cooking in a way. If you cut it now, it will be gooey inside. And if you cut it, it will not change anymore. So patience. If the bread is hard or crusty and you want it softer, you can wrap it in a towel while it's warm, put in a plastic bag and leave it to cool. The evaporating moisture will soften the bread. My bread loaf is soft, so I will only wrap it in a towel and leave it to cool. And enjoy your homemade rye bread. The loaf is big, and unless eaten quickly, it usually stays soft for about a week. Thank you for joining me today and see you next week. Bye!